Yeah, Alex, I met you in the Detransitioners group on Facebook, didn't we? And you've kindly agreed to come on and share your story.
Absolutely.
Do you want to just start with maybe like go back to all the way back in the chronology and start with maybe how it all started for you and what led you up to the point you're at now?
Yeah, so I wish it was an easier story. A lot of people have the story of, I just had some feelings and then I kind of chased it, but mine was a little more complicated. I went through pretty much my whole life as a boy, dated girls and had like what would consider a regular or normal-ish life as a boy, just with some quirks. I wasn't exactly normal, just normal, I guess normal weird stuff, if that makes sense. I was one of the more nerdy kids. I was, I didn't fit in as much. I was, awkward. I was all that kind of stuff. And so I ended up being on the fringes of bits of society and groups. If there was a group of kids, I hung out with the weird kids. Some kids over there, picking his burgers and stuff. Well, that's my best friend, like that guy. Like all the kids playing with Yu-Gi-Oh
Yeah.
cards and stuff. Those are my friends. And stuff like that. Anybody that stood out, I kind of made them my friend. Actually, my best friend growing up had cerebral palsy, and the reason we met was because other kids were picking on him, and I was like, "Well, you're going to be my friend now." So we became friends. So it was like that my whole life, and that elevated and evolved into the LGBT scene. And a couple of people on the video, the promo actually for the movie thing, the documentary, a lot of people mentioned like, our fringe groups weren't the LGBT community, when we were kids graduating in 2004 and stuff like that. But it was, and maybe it was just California, maybe it was just my little section, but it was a part of that. There was the goth kids in a corner. It was the LGBT kids in a corner. It was, the Yu-Gi-Oh kids in a corner, and those were all my groups. And so hanging out with those kind of people, I got into my mid 20s, went through college again, was a big supporter, part of those communities, and then I identified with parts of it, with parts of those communities, but I never thought I was gay. I never thought I was trans. I never thought I was anything. I just knew I was an ally, and then it ended up evolving to in my later 20s. A good friend of mine actually started introducing me to these other ideas, and the epiphany came about. And she asked me one day, while we were at a party, just, hey, are you a girl? Because I was telling her about all my feelings and desires and ways I was. She was like, are you like a girl? And I was like, that's a thing. And she was like, yeah, maybe you should look into it. And so I did. So I spent months and months researching it. Literally the next morning, I was like on the computer, on forums. What is trans? What is this? What are these feelings? And I spent so long researching it because I thought the only thing that was trans was Rocky Horror. I thought that was trans. I thought if you were trans, you were, Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror. But his character, I thought that was trans. It was fishnets and wigs and all this
Mm,
stuff. And I was like, that's not me. And then I learned it was more.
yeah.
And so I did the research, learned actually what it was, and was like, no, this makes a lot of sense. This sounds a lot like my feelings. And a lot of the people that I talked to that said, this is what I was before I transitioned, then I got happy. That was me. They were like, I had the same symptoms. I transitioned, it fixed it for me. So I was like, great, this is awesome. And this is over the course of, again, 6 months to a year. And then I started the process. I started it slow. I didn't really do it socially. I did it internally first. I started going through the motions. And then, yeah, just slowly evolved. And then I didn't officially change my name until I did it legally. I didn't really come out and present as female until I did it medically and surgically and with hormones. I was I wouldn't say more of a masculine man, but I had a really strong 5 o'clock shadow. I played a lot of sports in school, so I was more muscular and I didn't pass well. So I was like, I need some of the help first. I need the medical stuff before transitioning. So, and then I finished transitioning. Again, that's like the elaborate version. There's
Mm.
a lot to it. So, but that's how I got into it. I got started.
But that was your transitioning story, right? So,
Yeah, yeah,
and then we're going to come on to in a little bit about, the detransition process. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I am like quite green to all this stuff. I mean, I haven't,
yeah.
but I've never really got into the communities and actually really had these conversations properly.
Cool.
Well, I did speak to Walt Heyer, who's actually quite a high profile transitioner and detransitioner. But
Cool.
he's the only one I've really spoke to. But there's so many questions I have. It's just like, you know.
Yeah, and
Um,
if there's anything big or small, just jump in and be like, "Hey,
yeah,
what does that word mean?" or
yeah,
"What is
all
this?"
right.
Yeah,
Okay, be prepared for a lot of interrupting.
yeah, go
my,
for
my
it.
my my audience had a go at me for interrupting my guest a lot on the last one, but I guess I need to just to
Yeah.
keep pace.
No, I'll do
Yeah.
a primer and be like, "Hey, I approve of all the interruptions. Go for it." Just be like, "Hey, oh, blah blah blah," and I'll
All
get
right,
right into
good,
it. No
good. All right,
problem.
for the audience watching, I'm going to interrupt a lot because I need to keep pace of what's going on at the moment.
Yep.
So just understand that. All
Yep.
right, so okay, so Alex, you can I just summarize the story and then I'm going to come up with some questions. So
Yeah.
you were in your mid-20s when you were at a party and someone said and you were just sharing your feelings and this person said, "Oh wow, are you a girl?" So I'm guessing that they were seeing that you were being more expressive and showing your emotions, which to them is more of a feminine thing, I'm guessing, which
That was part of it, yeah.
yeah.
So it wasn't just because that's what a lot of people have attacked me for. They're like, "What? Because you wanted to like dress a certain way, or because you thought you were sensitive, you were a girl?" No, it
Mm,
was a lot of things.
right.
It was the aesthetics, and then it was the feelings, and then it was the this, and then that. And I'd had a long relationship. It wasn't some random conversation. This person that did this for me, I had like hours and hours long conversation with them many times before this had happened about who I was and my feelings and my thoughts and my personality and stuff. And so it was something that had, an aggregate over time that led to her asking that because she was aware of people that were trans and she knew people that were trans. And she was like, "Hey, your story matches like a lot of my friends. And a lot of your feelings match a lot of them. So is this an option for you? Is this what you think you are?"
But what do you think was really going on there? I mean, when you look back on that, like, and you're having these various polls that were taking you into, changing your gender. I mean, what were they when you actually reflect on it? What was actually really going on there?
Yeah, so that's the big question.
Mm,
Since detransitioning, it was like, when I made the decision to detransition, it was okay. Well, all those feelings were real that I had, and they weren't aesthetics. I just didn't want to be pretty. Like there was a lot more to it, and so that's been the last year or two has been unpacking that. This basically this solution that I thought was the solution wasn't the solution. Now I got to go rebuild the whole thing. You build your house out of straw, and then you go, "Oh crap! Now I got to rebuild the whole house." Like this doesn't work, and so
mm,
it's replacing it brick by brick now. And so, yeah, I've gotten into some of it without going through details of exactly my mental health of the
mm,
individual things because everybody's story is different too, and that's why I try not to get into the details of exactly what mine was because it's not going to match everybody else. There's this weird puzzle that everybody has of a lot of different things. And so a lot of it was aesthetics. A lot of it was the way I looked. I had inclinations, and my ideal version of myself was more feminine. I was like, I wanted to shave, my whole body, and then, certain types of, clothing and certain types of being and, makeup and things. And I had attractions to all these things to embody them. And now that I've learned that I should have just done that, I could just be a boy and have makeup. And
mm, mm,
so
mm.
that was one part of it. But then again, yeah, the sensitivity is something I should have had. And, I can break down all the parts on what they should have been. But that's been like my last year of kind of breaking it all down.
Yeah, because what I don't understand is if you are just a boy that happens to be a little bit more sensitive or even enjoys wearing makeup or wearing different clothes, more effeminate clothing, why is there this push to actually change your gender? If gender's all about how you identify, why is there a push to actually physically change if it's all about just how you feel about yourself?
Yep, and that's kind of what I'm getting into, and that's
Mm,
what part of this, my wanting to talk to people and be on
mm,
programs like this or the documentary, is because I haven't found a legitimate reason why somebody would have to fully change a gender. So the other part that I said to a lot of people, because when other people brought this up to me while I was transitioning, of hey, why don't you just? Because even my dad, that was a big kind of conversation, and one of the last conversations we had about it
mm,
because he never understood. He always mostly accepted or ignored, or he was passive about it, but it was never aggressive or even negative in any way. But he was like, "Man, I just don't get it. Why can't you just be like this and not change stuff?" And I was like, "Oh, Dad, you don't get it." And then a couple years later, I'm like, "Crap, he was right." Um, because that's what it is,
mm, mm,
honestly. And if it comes down to, well, because what I always explain to people, they're like, "Well, then why surgery?" I was like, "Because if you had, a penis growing out of your elbow, you would go get it cut off. So if you feel like there's a part that you don't need for your lifestyle or that doesn't align with your lifestyle and feelings, you would go remove that." Like nobody would not remove an extra hand growing out of their forehead. Like they would go get it removed because it doesn't match. Um, but my thinking it didn't match only aligned with the ideal that I was a female. So I think once because like I never had a problem with my downstairs parts. And people that do, it's usually because they don't use them and because they interact with, people differently and their partners differently where they don't need them and they want to change it. Um, or they think it doesn't align with being a female and so they have to. And then same thing with hormones and this and that. It's, hey, my chest isn't big enough, my muscles aren't big enough, my body's not a certain way. And those are all the medical interventions are all looks. Everything, every medical invention and intervention is a look. It's either I want to get something cut off, I want to get something added on, I want something smoother, I want something bigger, I want something to change in my body.
Mm.
And I think we really shouldn't be focused on looks as much. And it seems weird for the whole trans movement to summarize it as aesthetics, but 90% of it is. Some people transition and don't really do anything, but they still put on makeup, they still change their clothes. Like it's just different skins you're putting on your avatar, like a video game. Like you're just
Mm.
changing the way you look and the way you appear. You're already going to feel the same way. You just want your body and your reality to match your mind. And so it's all aesthetics, it's all looks. And no matter how big or small you do it, even if you're just taking hormones and you haven't done any surgeries, you don't do anything else, it's because you want to look a different way. And it feels weird for me for there to be a movement and for there to be so much medical intervention on looks when cosmetic surgery is usually like the dark horse of medical industry. And people that want to get into medical or like plastic surgeries over there, like we don't do that. Like there's a lot of negative stigma towards plastic surgery, and that's a lot of all this is. It's either
Mm.
chemically with hormones or physically with surgeries, and it's all about looks.
I mean, is it so important to actually have the full sex change operation? Because if it's just an aesthetics thing and how you interface with the world and how people see you, I mean, why is it so important to go complete the whole way and create an irreversible surgery? And also, I was going to ask you, is that actually what you had, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so on my stats wise, I did hormones for 6 years. I was on
Mhm.
hormones for 6 years. I did have bottom surgery and I had facial surgery, but thankfully, when I had my facial surgery, they were asking kind of what I was going for, and I was like, well, I basically, I told them I was like, have you ever played Sims or do you know the Sims games? They're like, yeah, and I was like, basically, make my avatar and then click over to the female version. Like, I want me just the girl version of it. I didn't want to change anything. I don't want a new nose, new eyes. I
Yeah.
just wanted to feminize everything. And that's why even now I can still pass as a boy. I've
Mm.
had like full surgery. I have like 13 procedures on my face, but I don't look unnatural because I looked like the version of myself. I was like, I don't want big lips or this or that. I was like, just smooth it all out. Like
Mm.
put, how they have those filters on Snapchat now where you can see the girl version of yourself. I
Yeah.
was like, make one of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
And so,
Wow. So you can
um,
actually choose how you want to look, and that's you can they
kinda,
what that you
yeah.
go in there and they say, how do you want to look? And you just show them some photos or of kind of
Yeah. And then
really.
they do their best. Yeah. And you tell them what you don't like about your face. And then they talk about the whole procedure. And they talked about like, well, males usually have this and females usually have that, and so they use that as a guide. Males' brow ridges are raised, females are flat. Males' noses are bigger, women's are more narrow, and so they use all those as a guide when they do the facial surgery. And yeah, I did both. And back to your question though about why would it matter?
Yeah.
Because even if for women who transition, if they get the double mastectomy, that is something that is shown, that is something they can see. But if it's downstairs parts, which is usually only trans women um, who need that, because female parts, they don't really have a good surgery to make them into male parts. It's
Mm.
starting, but it's not functional, and it usually just has to do with your partner. Usually has to do with relationships and how you interact with your partner and how you want your sexual experience to be in life. But it also, even though it's not aesthetics for the world, it's also aesthetics for the mirror, for the shower, for everything else.
Mm.
Like if you think you're transitioning, you look down and you see a boy part, you have that kind of like, whoa, that's not right, because your whole life feels feminine, but females don't have those parts. And so you look down, and you go, whoa, what the heck? Like imagine if you woke up one day, look down, and you seen breasts. You'd be like, what? I need to go get these removed. Like these don't match. And that's what trans feels like. And that's
Got
why the
you.
procedures and everything else.
So that's when you say bum surgery, sorry, because bum in English means like your backside, like we're talking
Oh
front.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So So you had,
Um,
so you actually had
oh,
everything
bottom
cut off.
surgery. Bottom surgery.
Bottom,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
sorry, bottom, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But does that mean that means the front in American, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's it. Back it's the back in English. Yeah, that's what confused me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Sorry.
if you don't mind me asking, so everything is gone there now, still.
Yeah, and actually there's
Wow.
two forms of the procedure, one where they just get rid of it and one where they actually turn it into female parts, and I actually got that one.
Right.
So I technically have female parts. So it
Wow.
makes my life
Okay.
complicated.
I've got even more questions. I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah,
So now
yeah,
you're in a
yeah.
situation where, and let's talk a little bit about the. We'll talk a little bit in a moment about the detransition process and how that came about for you, and then what was that like. But just, I
Yeah.
just want to stay on the kind of the transitioning part because you mentioned that the the physical avatar is changed based upon getting into alignment with your mind at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So why is it that these surgeries don't explore the mind of these people first and see if there is any kind of issue there, a kind of dysphoria where they're unable to accept themselves first and take them through a rigorous, I don't want to say therapy, but it kind of is almost that, where at least we're understanding the root cause of this. Is there a psychological issue that's catalyzing this want to change, a physical appearance? Why is there not enough of that? Why does it go straight in? Why are they so quick to go into the surgery?
You hit the nail on the head, and that's a lot of what I'm talking about because 10 years ago there was. You had to be in therapy constantly, go through 2 years of living as your current gender. So you had to actually act out your gender and be yourself, be going through therapy while you're doing it, understand your feelings, talk to your therapist about how does it feel to go out in public as yourself, as this new avatar. Tell people your new name, tell people your new this. Is it fixing your dysphoria? And there was a process, but over the last 10 years it's gotten weaker and weaker. And if you're somebody intelligent like I was, because I had started going through therapy but I went through like 6 sessions, but then I moved states, told my new state in California that I had been through therapy because I had, and it had been roughly 2 years, but it was 6 sessions and then a couple sessions off and then a couple sessions on and then a couple sessions off, with different counselors. So I never really got any work done because it's in the Midwest too, and they weren't very good. So there was no vetting. I had seen a counselor a couple times, and I was basically thorough and intelligent about it. I said, "Nope, I want to transition. This is exactly how I feel. This is exactly this." Like there ends up being like a playbook on what you can say to get the results you want, and they can't push back against you. And that's a problem with the counseling community right now is they actually can't tell someone that they're not trans. If someone says, "This is my identity, I am a boy or I am a girl," the counselor can't say, "Well, let's explore that because you may be wrong." They can't. They can't say that
Really? Why not?
legally. Because you're denying their identity. You have to accept their identity, and then you can't fix it. And that's the problem. That's the juxtaposition that's happening right now in therapy is you can't fix something that's not wrong. And if somebody identifies as something, it's inherently not wrong. And that's the
That yeah,
problem.
this
Yeah.
is the kind of the trick of it all. This is what I think so insidious about it all.
Yep.
They're saying that you can't fix the mind, but you can fix your body, and then that will totally change everything. It's
Yeah. And
it's
it
it's
doesn't.
it's warped in that sense, isn't it? And you have
Yep.
people that are, I don't want to say confused, but maybe some are,
Hmm.
some are people are confused because they later realize they were. And instead
Yeah.
of kind of working through that and spending the time, and like you said, like the old way of the old protocol of like spending the time and going backwards and forwards, having discussions, chats about it, it's just
Hmm.
instantly straight into the hormone. You actually mentioned it was first hormone replacement therapy, or what
Yeah. So even my doctor, the first doctor I had, because there's so little education and there's so much like protesting and anger and people suing people and complaints filed against people for not accepting genders and not accepting identities and stuff, that I went into my doctor, and pretty much every time I've dealt with any medical anybody in the medical community or therapy community, I can feel that when they're interacting with me, they're scared
Mm,
because they don't want to say the wrong thing and they don't want to, they're like walking on eggshells, and I'm calling the shots and I shouldn't because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a counselor, but I can feel everybody's walking on eggshells. And so I walk in and go, "Oh no, I've transitioned." They go, "Oh, um uh what is there a pronoun? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," like, and there's so much hesitance, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm running this whole show." "No, you're fine." And I get treated like a king. I can be like, "Well, I need hormones." They go, "Oh, well, sorry, yep, we can get that right for you." Like, and even my first doctor,
wow.
no blood tests, no verification, no counseling. I was like, "I have these feelings of gender dysphoria and this and that." And he goes, "Well, I have one other patient like that, so They usually prescribe estrogen, right? I go, yeah. And he goes, okay, here you go.
What?
Yeah, because everyone's so afraid, and because everyone's so, there's been so much clash and um, I guess aggregation and like animosity, I guess is the best word, um, in this realm and in this spectrum, that everyone's so afraid of losing their jobs, losing their licenses, or even just getting bad reviews and stuff from people in complaints filed, that they kind of stopped pushing. And they go, well, if you want to destroy your body, here you go. And that's where it is everyone else. They have checks and balances. I had to sign a bunch of papers saying that I knew what I was doing and this and that. It's like signing consent for a tattoo. Like
I was just
I'm an
going to say,
adult.
it's
I
like a
understand.
tattoo. It's like
Yeah.
just going for a tattoo.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, it seems to me as though like the trans community, if you want to call it a community, even though everyone's an individual here, I guess, but
Yep.
it's become such a powerful force, like an organism and a political entity, that
Mhm.
to to question a person's choice to transition is almost like a political issue now, where
Mhm.
you're you're seen as some kind of far right Nazi, fascist,
Yep.
um, transphobe, any kind of phobe or is they'll throw at you, and
Yep.
people just don't want to go there. They don't want to have
Yep.
to deal with that political warfare, do they? So
Yep.
like they just take the path of least resistance, it sounds like, and just go right,
Yep.
treat it like a tattoo. If this person says they want it, just give it to them.
Yep. And that's the hard part of the medical side. If somebody wanted to dress a certain way or even identifies a certain way, um, that's not an issue, but that's why there's pushback when it comes to stuff like sports and, locker rooms and prisons and the stuff where it actually kind of matters whether you're on one side or the other and what you identify as. For the most of the world, no, nobody cares. And most of the intelligent people I see that are talking about this always say, I literally could not care less what you do with your life. But when you start interacting with society, now we kind of have to draw some lines, because that's why we drew the lines in the first place. Um, and it's become very political in that sense, because then you go, okay, well, now we have to redefine the lines. Where are those lines? And if you say somebody can't do this unless they're this way, now you're a transphobe, and like you're talking about, now you're all these things because you're denying this person. And that's where it's so messy right now. Is like, well, do you let somebody who just started transitioning 2 weeks ago into the women's locker room? Do you let them into women's sports? They just started 2 weeks ago. They identify as a female. And then if you don't, when do you? Like, do you eventually ever? Do you not? Do they have to be this? Do they have to be that? Do they have to be on hormones for 2 years? Because not everybody that transitions on hormones. And so it invented all these things that we're trying to sort out. And there's a little bit of a sense of where we should sort those things out and draw those lines just so they're drawn and defined. But I think the bigger conversation is what happened to the medical industry and what happened to the world, where we weren't able to talk about it like adults, where we weren't able to confront the issue like adults, maturely and intelligently, with resources and things like that. Now, I've seen a lot of debates and conversations about this where both sides are intelligent, and those are the conversations I want to have. It's when somebody starts shouting, somebody gets angry, somebody takes it personal, and all these things happen, where we can't have these logical debates, where we don't just start cutting people off and, well, this is that, well, you're this, and name calling and all these types of things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the like I think you mentioned a good phrase. It's like it's almost like the blurring of the lines. We need to be able to draw
Hmm.
some lines in society, and I
Yeah.
think because there's no clear line that's been drawn here, like you said, it's a kind of a grey area. Like when does it become appropriate for someone to use the bathroom of the opposite sex if they're transitioning to
Yeah.
that sex?
Hmm.
And on that, then, can I ask when you transitioned? Um, what were you doing? Were you straight away was it when you got the operation? Did you then start using the bathroom, the female bathrooms, or how did it play
Yeah.
out for you?
So that one was always hard for me, because when I was in the middle, which was always the hardest part, when I kind of passed as female, like when I was wearing makeup, somewhat feminine clothes, I most of my life actually centered around being I didn't. I ended up like having to leave the gym if I had to go to the bathroom, because I was terrified and I didn't know which one to use, because I kind of passed, but it was a political issue. Like I would look at the bathrooms and go, I'm making a political statement right now, no matter what side I go on. Either I go into the men's room with my makeup on and everyone stares at me, or I go into the women's room and I have these broad shoulders and everyone stares at me. Where the hell do I go to the bathroom? Like I just don't
Yeah.
want to offend anyone. I just have to pee.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the problem. And I have to make a statement one way or another on, and then not only that, but I'm doing it and I'm now making this establishment make a choice on what they will put up with and what they allow. Like, I would go up to the front desk and be like, "Hey, I'm trans. Which bathroom would you guys rather me use? Like, if it's an issue, please let me know and I will use the men's room. I don't want to offend those people, but how would you like it?" But they're also so scared. They go, "Well, whatever you feel comfortable with." And I'm like, "All right, I'll go home." Like,
Mm. Yeah.
and so I did. There were a couple times where I was using the women's room and things like that, but it never felt comfortable. So I usually just still went in the men's room. It was a lot easier because I passed more. And politically, if they're like, well, there's just a dude in makeup in the men's room, okay, like that's less of an issue. And then I just use the stall. So that's what I've had to do my whole life now. Is I still just use the men's room, and I just have to use stalls now. So kind
Wow.
of sucks.
Yeah, that's got to be something that's you've lost the male privilege of standing up, I guess.
Yeah, dude, camping and stuff, it's the worst. Now I know all these struggles. It's actually nice because I get to see both sides of the struggle of some
Mm,
things. I've actually developed a lot of intelligence on both sides of things because not only did I transition and
mm,
embody that, but I also was assuming that facade and that persona. So I got to try to align myself with those things. And now I will never say that I fully became female because since I wasn't born that way, I never fully was. And anybody
mm,
transitioning, if it's true or not. So I'm not going to deny that transitioning is not a thing. It is true for some people. You do have gender dysphoria. Some
mm,
people do need to present themselves differently. It is valid, and that's something I want to have it as a disclaimer to all this. This is not as a transphobic thing that I don't think anybody should be trans. That I don't think anybody shouldn't transition. There's some people that are, but it's not to the level that it's at now.
yeah,
Um, but aligning myself with those ideals of being a female, I really got to understand things differently because I basically went over to that side of the line. I went over there and was like, "Hey guys, we're all hanging out."
mm,
And so doing that, I really got to understand a lot of things better. And yeah, peeing while camping as a girl sucks. It's
mm. Yeah.
and having both, like having been a boy for so
Mm,
long and then transitioning for so long and now coming back, like I have such an understanding of the gender divergence. Now I feel honored to have gone through what I've gone through, and there's not
mm.
as much regret as there should be because
What
I took it as a learning experience.
what did you sort of when you were identifying more as a woman and became in your eyes a woman, what were
Mhm.
you feeling was the benefits of that? Like what and did you feel were there times where you felt totally comfortable and happy with that avatar, if you want to use that word as your word there?
Yeah, yeah, a bit. I felt happy, but I realized over time, and this came towards the beginning of my detransition when I started thinking, I am gonna detransition, and I was like, well, what did that mean for all this other stuff?
Mm.
And um, sorry, can you rephrase the question again? I kind
Yeah,
of
no,
lost.
like so when you actually were identifying as a woman, and let's say you'd had the operation, and you were going out there as Alex the woman, right?
Yeah.
Was there a time where you felt totally comfortable with that, or was there still something in your mind, a splinter in your mind saying there's still something not quite right here? Was there a tipping point? Was there a turning point where you started to realize that this was wrong and what you've done is, you at that point, oh, I've gone past the point of no return. Like, or
Yep.
were you for a few months happy and comfortable and living it out as a woman?
Yep, and that's actually what ended up that specific series of thoughts actually ended up what led to the detransition. So I started once I got my name changed, got the bottom surgery, healed from it, started presenting as female. I dressed and did makeup every day as a female, and
Mm,
told my name is Alexis. I'm a female, blah blah blah. 'Cause my full first name is Alexis, but thankfully I can go by Alex now, and I don't have to change
mm,
it back. Um, but so when I was fully presenting, it felt happy. But then over a couple months, I realized that the problems that I had had before didn't go away. The things that I thought it would fix didn't fix.
mm,
It was always, well, I'm going to wait till surgery. Well, I'm going to wait till my name change. I'm going to wait till this. And then I did all that stuff and then got to the end of all that, healed, started going through my life, went to work and was like, everything's the same. Work's still the same. Traffic still sucks. I still like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I still don't
mm,
like mushrooms. Like my world is not any different. I did feel proud of my accomplishments. Getting to that point, doing those things. I did look a certain way that I wanted to look. I grew my hair out. I put on the makeup. I learned how to do makeup. I did all these things that I could be proud of, but I realized I was only proud of the accomplishment part of it. That if I had set a goal as a boy to put on muscle, to do something else, to write my poetry, whatever goal I was going to set, I would have felt that accomplishment. So that's the positivity I was chasing, and that's the positivity that was fueling the whole process. It was boom, I hit another milestone. Awesome, great. I'm going to keep going because that dopamine of achieving something. And I think that's what it is for a lot of people is they want to transition, they do it, they transition, and it's I did it. I've
Mm,
transitioned like it's some great thing, the same way as if you got a new job or a new car or fix something about yourself or lost 10 pounds. All those things feel good because it's a goal that you set that you achieved, and
mm,
that feels good. That's what we do as humans. That's what dopamine is for. It's like
mm,
it's a goal achieving thing. And so everything was based around that. And so once I realized that nothing really changed after that high had fallen of accomplishment, that nothing had really changed. And that's when I started thinking about, okay, well then what was it? What did I do all this for? Like everything's exactly the
mm.
same. And so I just started not putting on makeup because it was a pain and it took like 40 extra minutes every morning. And then I stopped shaving my legs because it doesn't matter. I wasn't in a relationship at the time. I was like, I don't need my legs to be pretty. I'll just let them go. And then I realized I was like, I'm just a boy. Like
Mm,
what is like I still have all these other things. I still like doing some of these feminine things, but really my life hasn't changed from when I was 15 to when I was 22 to when I was 32. Like nothing's really adjusted that much, the same as it would anybody else that's gotten older. Um, so maybe I just don't need to do this and buy all these medications and go through all this work and shove these needles in my legs and, and deal with all these hormones and like all this other work that I had to do. I was like, I don't need to do that. It doesn't help any part of my life. It doesn't make my job better. It doesn't make my poetry better. It doesn't make me a better father. It doesn't, none of this stuff.
So your mind had changed at that point then, because before you were changing the avatar to fit the mind, but had your
Hmm.
mind now changed? And in what way? Was it just like a kind of convenience thing, or because before it was about aligning the physical with the feeling of sensitivity and having more emotion, stuff like that. But now, had you changed? Like, was the set that you didn't feel like that was important anymore, and it was more about the convenience of not having to do all this stuff, or what was
Yeah,
different?
yeah. So it was kind of like you climb a hill because you think you're going to get better sun, and then you get to the top of the hill and it's all cloudy. And you're like, oh crap! Well, I don't need to be on top of this hill anymore because this is not any better. So it's kind of like that. If I got up there thinking my life was going to be better, I was going to be happy, I wasn't going to struggle as much with my depression or loneliness. I felt those things because of my transition, or I felt this thing because of I was a boy, because I was repressed, because I didn't have any personality, because I couldn't be myself, because I could XYZ. Then I realized that transitioning didn't solve any of those things. And now it does for some people. Those are the people that really have gender dysphoria, and there are a lot of those people. But I think the majority of the movement isn't that. And even if it is gender dysphoria, a lot of times that can be fixed with better counseling and better understanding of who you are, who you should be, aligning yourself with your true self and not some avatar that you're creating. There are better ways to do that, but we don't have enough good counselors to fix everybody. And now that it's kind of in the zeitgeist, that it's a part of mainstream society now, there is more people transitioning or talking about transitioning or playing with the idea of gender. Now we have,
Mm.
I'm non-binary, I'm um, twin spirited, and all these types
Yeah,
of things that you can be now. There's not enough people to help us sort it. It's kind of like everyone started pooping and there's not enough plumbers. That's
yeah.
kind of where we're at, and it's piling up because
And
not
they're
enough people
frightened,
can help us.
and they're frightened to be plumbers, because they know
Yep.
that being a plumber in that metaphor is considered
It's messy.
transphobic. Yeah, well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
sort of they're a threat. The plumbers are the threat to
Yeah.
the to the whole system. So yeah, I do
And they
think that
are.
yeah, and that it is so political that I mean I it's a war on objective reality. I think on a deeper spiritual level, it's like trying to
Hmm.
move from the objective reality into the subjective reality.
Yeah.
So, and I think that so instead of honoring the objective, it's now pulling it more into whatever you feel about yourself, how you feel. Like if you had a boy that felt a little bit more effeminate, you would just say that's a boy that feels a little bit more effeminate. Now it's like, no,
Yeah.
have you considered that maybe you're a girl? It's trying to
Which is
make your
exactly the question
subjective
I got.
reality
Yeah.
an objective truth, which I find a paradox in itself. Or we used to
Yep.
have girls that were a little bit more masculine. We'd say you're a tomboy,
Yeah.
tomboy-ish, you would say. But what they're
Yeah.
trying to do now is try and take the adjectives and turn it into a noun. you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like how you describe yourself. No, that actually is you. That is so cut your bits off, you know, and it's just going way too far, but there's no real
Yeah.
pushback because there's a sensitivity around it. Trans has become a protected group. It's on the
Yep.
LGBTQ banner, which means
Yep.
that it's like a protected victim class, which means it acts with complete uh, immunity to criticism, which I find,
Mm-hmm.
that's the danger of it, I think. How did this all play out in terms of your relationships? Were you attracted to other boys? Was that also a part of the reason why you wanted to transition? And when you had the transition, were you attracted to boys, or were you still having relationships and wanting to be intimate with women? What was your sexual orientation and preferences like, and how did that, bleed into your decision making?
Yeah. So that was the kind of harder part for me was I was still attracted to women. I consider myself bi. At a couple points in my life. I have been with a couple men, but it was never good. And I actually learned because men are terrible at that. Um, so like being a man, I always kind of prided myself on like wanting to be better and like be a good partner. And so when I was with other men, I was like, oh, most of these guys suck. This is why, because I've never had a problem with women. I've never had a problem.
Mm,
Both looks wise or relationships wise. I've always either had long term relationships or, I've never really had a problem in that spectrum.
mm,
And so I realized that I never had a problem because the rest of men sucked. I was like, wow, it's not that
mm.
I'm good, it's that all the rest of these guys are not. And so
In
that
what
was
way
my
though?
problem with it.
In what way? So,
Um, physically, physically, like there's maybe it's just my style didn't match theirs, but
mm,
the I think I was with three different men throughout my life, and all of them were terrible. They were awful experiences. They were not good partners. I don't know, it's because I wanted more communication because I'm used to a certain way. Maybe it's because maybe I was awkward, so were they. Like a lot of things could have happened, but I never had a good experience, and so I was like, well, I'm done with all that.
mm,
So I was like, well, I'm not bi. And then when I started transitioning, it was, well, I like girls, and I guess now I'm a lesbian. And so I just stayed with women. But when I first started transitioning, when I first started telling people about it, I'd actually just met what ended up becoming later my wife and the mother to my child. And I told her, I just as we started getting together, I was like, hey, I'm transitioning. And she's like, well, then I guess I'm a lesbian and blah, 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 because we were soulmates and all this kind of stuff. And so I was like, sweet, that takes a lot of pressure off. And so she was with me for the first part of my transition. And then we split up, and oddly enough, it had nothing to do with my transition. We had differences as people and as parents and as partners and this and that. But it really maybe for her it did because I lost some of my masculinity. That's what a lot of women are attracted to. I still had my personality, but it was never like part of our conversations or part of our issues. But yeah, no, I never had an issue. And then I ended up being in the LGBT scene, and so it was a lot easier finding partners. Now I can't date regularly. I can't just go to the bar and talk to someone because I look like this, and it's like, we want to go back to my place, and I'm like, hey, I gotta tell you something. Like we
mm,
gotta have that talk. So I can't meet regularly. But in the LGBT scene, I'm like, I have detransitioned or I'm trans, and people are like, that's great, cool. What parts you got? We can work with it.
mm.
They make all sorts of attachments for whoever, and I can navigate my way that way. But relationships wise, like actual out in the world, not just physically, it's the same. I operate as a male in my relationships, and the girls that I've been with are totally happy with it. Bedroom stuff gets complicated, but besides that, I'm just still, I hold hands and I drive the car and I open the
Mm.
doors, but that's just who I am as a person. So
Wow. Okay, there's a couple of things there. So you said
yeah.
you've got a child.
Hmm.
That's the thing. So that was with that ex at the time, or are
Hmm.
you now back together? Did you kind of form a relationship again
No.
after that, or was that from before?
Yeah, so that was before. So that was when we met when I was totally male, and then I
Yeah.
told her I had started the process. I just started those feelings, and I had some inclinations, and I
Mm,
thought I was going to lose her, and she said, "Nope, that's all good." And so we continued to navigate our relationship, and this was the beginning process of it, where I was only taking hormones, and that kind of went back and forth sometimes because I moved and all this, but
mm.
um, so yeah, we did. We got pregnant and we had a child, and everything
Wow.
was going great with that. And we even talked about how do we talk about him with two moms and blah blah blah.
Mm,
Like that was a whole part of our conversation. But then we split up again, mostly nothing to do with my transition. Just had to do with who we were as people. We didn't match as much. And then since detransitioning, the the differences that we had while we were married and that we split up for are the same reasons we don't get back together. We have differences in lifestyles, we have differences in political beliefs and the way we navigate things, but we're intelligent enough people now to where we co-parent well. She actually lives with me now. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, and it was great because we had to do visitation and custody, and it came up an opportunity to where I had an extra room and she needed a place, and I was like, dude, just come here. So we get along just fine. Like we have dinners together as a family,
Mm.
and we just co-parent, and it's kind of a unique situation that we can get along so well. But we do it, for our son. Um, and so this gives him the best life where he gets to have both of his parents. They get along and we get to do our thing. And so it's complicated sometimes, but for the most part, yeah, we both just live our lives. And I actually currently am dating as well. She's back in California. She had family there. This gets in the complicated part of my life, but I'm dating. She was here and then she moved because she wanted to be with her family, but we're still together. So we've been together a year and a half. We were together for a year,
Right.
and then she moved back home to California to be with family for a little while. But
Her
yeah,
fa you
no,
mean
they
her? You mean she's got another partner and a child, or do you mean just her parents? That
her,
that
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
parents and
yeah, yeah,
sister and
yeah,
cousins and all that. Yeah.
yeah.
And
Wow.
so
Okay.
so yeah, I've always dated fine because I've either been transparent about it, which is funny
Mm.
because I'm a transparent, that I can be so transparent. Uh
Yeah,
um
it's good.
with my partners and with my friends. So even when I started talking to her, when we started um just like getting flirty with each other, even when I start getting flirty with someone, if I notice something happening, I'm like, hey, just to let you know, laying it out here, like, is that something you would want to pursue? And I've never really had anybody say no. They're always just like, well, that actually seems more fun. So yeah, let's do it. And it's
Mm.
kind of like an experiment of, wait, what does this feel like? But I can't date, women who want to be with a traditional
Mm.
or normal quote unquote guy. Um, I have to be with someone that's kind of on the fence, that's wants something kind of unorthodox. But yeah, I've still never had a problem dating, which has been crazy that I've
So
been able to find enough.
okay, so tell me if this is going too far, but like, how does that work then, sexually? I mean, do you just have to, be creative in? Is it a lot of scissoring? I mean, what goes on?
Yeah, if we want to get in the details of it, there can be, and that's what's
Yeah.
so different. Of the same way that a male and a female would find
Mm.
interesting ways to do things. Like
Mm.
sometimes maybe you bring pudding in and you do something upside
Mm.
down, and
Yeah.
maybe you rub this thing this way.
Mm.
We do the same thing.
Right.
You rub parts together, you touch things, you got
Okay.
hands and mouths and stuff, and
Yeah.
everyone just kind of does stuff. So I've been with partners that have been open
Mm.
and exploratory, which how I was as a male
Mm.
too, which actually led into my transition because I had a lot of inclinations and a lot of things sexually that I was like, these aren't normal guy feelings. There's a lot of things I
Yes.
want to do in this spectrum that aren't normal male things. And so I was like, well, maybe that has to do with this. And then along with everything else, it was like, okay, that's a part of it. And
But
I realized that
is your
those things,
actual, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
is this vagina that you've had made, is it, I mean, it's hard to say, does it feel like a real vagina because you would
Does
never
it
know.
function? Yeah, because I don't
But
know.
does it, I mean, would you say though that given what you know about vaginas, that it is as close to a sensitive and feeling vagina as one that if you were born with? I mean, is that like, how does it work? Like, I'm guessing there's not a clitoris.
No, actually there is. So it
Really?
was
Well,
there.
how's that? Oh God, it's too much.
Yeah, yeah. There didn't used to be. So back
Right.
10 to 15 years ago, it
Yeah.
was they just cut it off. And then it turned
Right.
into, well, we can kind of give you one. And actually the procedure I got,
Yeah.
it was designed for women who had had damage. So say their legs got cut off or they're in some
Mm.
accident and they had to rebuild it. They did the
Mm.
same thing with mine and they rebuild it in the same way. And actually it works the same way as so when we're embryos and when we're in utero, all of our parts are the same, and then they transition from one thing to another, but we still have all the same parts. So the top of a male's part is actually the clitoris, and the outsides of a male part is actually this thing, and they all just morph in utero anyway. So all the doctors do is basically reverse all that stuff. So it's fascinating if you ever want to look it up, what a vaginoplasty looks like. But yeah, they like turn it inside out and take this part and turn it into this thing, and then put this part over here and stitch this thing together, and it's crazy. Um, but yeah, no, when I used it, I don't anymore. Because after detransitioning, it feels weird now for someone to be inside my body. Because I'm like, you shouldn't be.
Yeah, what was that
But
like? What was that like, the feeling when like you actually being penetrated?
yeah, so I had experimented with that with backdoor stuff.
Right.
when I was fully a male, and I was like, okay, this is gonna feel better later. You know, it hurts now, but the feeling of being feminine, you know, felt better. Um, but I was like, but it hurts, you know, like this is
Mm.
uncomfortable. So I would rather have these other parts. And so once I got them, yeah, it was pretty great actually. While I was still feeling that way, while I still felt like a female, it was
Mm.
amazing. It was everything I thought it was going to be. And then I realized I was just as happy with my old parts and how
Oh,
happy they
really?
made me doing stuff as these ones do. Like it was six of one, half a dozen the other. Like it was different. It was very different, and it was
Mm.
more satisfying in a different way, but less satisfying in other ways. Um,
Mm.
and it made me realize a lot about sex and how it differs for the sexes. I've actually written like a little article about it, and I want to turn it into poems and all this other stuff that I write. But it's very much as a whole, not just physically and not just on the different parts of stimulation, but as a whole, intercourse is different for each side. And it's so hard to explain without really getting into the whole thing. But when you're, I'm going to use words that don't really mean this, but they are the best way I can think of to describe them. So when you're the male in the relationship or the top or however you want to do it, because even lesbian couples can have it and all this kind of stuff. But when you're the person doing the actions, you are the aggressor. And there's certain levels of feelings that go along with that and thoughts and ideas. And then when you're the receiver, there are certain thoughts and ideas and actions that go along with that. That's why in public you can be like, oh, that's a top, that's a bottom, that's a this, that's a that. And so and men and women can go either way. And so it's not assigning it specifically to a gender. But when you're on one side or the other, or when your parts align with one side or the other, you do have different feelings about intercourse and about your partner and about your interactions. And so those did, yeah, they had to switch. I went from being this top and the person kind of in charge, and the person, you know, because when you're with someone, they're submitting to you, they're allowing you to enter their body, and there's all this stuff that goes along with it. And so when you're the person being entered and allowing someone to enter your body, it's a lot different. There's a lot of feelings that go along with it that are not better or worse, just different. And so I got to see it on both sides of things. Um, but yeah, it's a lot different. But I realized it was just that it was different, not better. And so that kind of again was like, hey, this is still just intercourse. This sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good.
Mm.
It's all the same as it was. You know, it wasn't inherently the best thing that's ever happened. Now, if my dysphoria was worse, if I hadn't had a life as a boy that was pleasurable, and I hadn't had as many partners as I had had, because I had had an amazing physical, you know, sexual relationship my pretty much my whole life growing up, and through my 20s and stuff. If I hadn't had that, it would feel like heaven. It would feel like glory. It would feel like I'm finally getting to this
Mm.
place and connecting to another person. I think that's what a lot of trans people do is when you're trans early, or when you know your whole life that your body doesn't match and you finally get to have intercourse with these new parts, it's satisfying, it's celebratory, it's, oh, this is what connection to another human being feels like. I'd already had that as a boy. You know, I'd already had amazing connection. I had, you know, multiple years long relationships with, you know, really engaged partners and had these like otherworldly experiences with people. And so it wasn't that for me. It was just the physical part of it. And I was like, parts are parts.
Lots of
Like
parts.
yeah, they pretty much feel the same. They have a lot of the same things, and it feels different,
Can you
obviously.
can you
But
orgasm? Like,
yeah, and even afterwards,
wow, what's that
like
like?
pretty much the same.
Really? Yeah.
Honestly. Yeah, I mean it changed by like 10%, 20%. I'm like it lost this little thing that it used to
Ah,
have, but now it has this little other thing that's kind of cool.
what? What's
Um
the other thing? Multiple
Well,
orgasms.
what was crazy is I could do that before. And I
Really?
think that's, yeah, that led me on to being, well, maybe
Ah,
I'm different because I could like do this and then do this. I could do a lot of things that females could do, you
right.
know, physically and sexually. And that's why I had a lot of success with partners, I guess, because I was more in tune with that. I wasn't a traditional male. I didn't, you know, I wasn't a one and done and take a nap kind of guy. Um, and so I was like, well, maybe I'm a girl because I like to go for 4 or 5 hours at a time, and then we do this, and then we cuddle, and then we do something else, and then blah blah blah. And that's usually more of a female way of doing things.
Mm.
So I was like, well, maybe I'm a girl then. Maybe the way I have sex is like a girl. No, I was just a good partner. Like that's all that was. It wasn't that I was a
Mm.
girl. It was just that I was an engaged partner that liked intercourse a certain way. So yeah, I always could before, even without like back stuff, which was like a totally
Wow.
different feeling. I could get a couple off, you know, as a guy, and then so I still could, as a
Does the
female.
orgasm feel like, yes, it feels pretty much the same then. The actual female orgasm's the same.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Okay.
it's weird because it's like the same way as a male that yours will feel different. If you, you know, take care of yourself in the morning before work feels different than a full hour-long session with a female. Those orgasms feel different. It's like, well, this one felt a certain way, and then when I'm with this person, they feel a different
Mm,
way, and I'm with somebody I love, it feels a certain way. When I'm with someone I don't care about, it feels a different way. It's the same thing. So there's ones that are bigger, there's ones that are smaller, there's ones
yeah.
that kind of build up a little bit, and there's ones that just happen real quick. It's the same thing for girls. Girls,
Mm,
mostly the problem with female orgasms is that women don't know their parts and they don't understand their parts, and so they don't know how to talk to their partners to get themselves to a certain point, how to mentally get themselves in a state where they can get to a certain point. And that's more the problem with the female orgasm and why it's different than males. And males in the same way don't know how to not just focus on that climax, how to not just focus on certain things, and how to let it build and
yeah.
grow and ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And so it's more of an inability of both sexes than an ability of mine to still be able to have multiple, or have multiple before, or have it not change. I think was more related to my experience. And I'm not the only one. There are millions of people that I'm sure have the same experience as I do. So I'm not special in any way, but I think that's what makes me different from females and my female orgasms, or males and my male orgasms. So,
Yeah, that's such a brilliant answer, by the way. And it does sound as though by seeing both ends of the spectrum, it's made you understand the actual sexual
mm-hmm.
ritual itself. Because you mentioned before about, you understood that you liked a bit more communication. You didn't like the kind of
Mm-hmm.
the pump and dump kind of like the male kind of just
Yeah.
get it. And so you already had a little bit of that, but now that you've kind of gone into one end of the spectrum and come back, you've seen
Mm-hmm.
it all now. And so for you,
Yeah.
what's your takeaway from the sexual ritual, if you want to call it that, the
Yeah.
best? You mentioned it a little bit there about building up the tension and then it go, letting it bubble up, and then like, for you,
Yeah.
what does the great sexual experience look like now that you've gone through everything?
Well, it's different now because it's all based on my partner. I'm a little
Yeah.
bit more reserved in the sense that I'm not going to ask someone to do something they're uncomfortable with. So if I'm with someone who wants a more traditional male, I'm not going to be like, "Hey, will you do this thing to me?" Because they're like, "That's not something I want to do." The same way as if you're with a partner and they don't like to do something, you're not going to make them do it. If they're
Mm,
like, "I don't like to do stuff with my hands," you're not going to be like, "Hey, you want to do a hand stuff?" No, they don't want to. So I don't ask for certain things. So it's more based on what my partner wants. It's always been that way. But now that I don't have traditional parts, I'm a lot more, you let me know and I'll adjust where I need to go. And so a great experience to me is still similar to how it was when I was a boy or when I was a girl. I like intimacy. I like really engaged partners. I like I can go to my preferences, but
mhm,
that's what it ends up being. When you've seen both sides of it, you kind of want all of it. And so it ends up being involved. And you mentioned ritual. Ritual is a great word for it because there is more than the body, there's more than the mind, there's more than this. I'm also very spiritual.
mm,
I understand, my energies and auras and kundalinis and chakras
mhm.
and all that stuff. um, and so
Mm,
I'm into all that, and so it is more of an experience for me. I know that I'm bonding my soul to somebody else, even if it is somebody that's a temporary partner. The times that I've had flings, even after surgery, I know that I'm tying my soul to somebody else, and that's what it should be. Even if it is a fling or a one-time thing, you are still binding your soul to that person, whether or not you want to or think you are or aren't. Being physical and intimate with someone is special and different. It's why you don't remember, Jeffrey off the street that you met for 10 minutes, but you will probably remember that one night stand, even if you don't remember her name. You've still tied yourself to them somewhat. So I think keeping all those things in mind is what makes it better for me when my partner can match me on all those levels. Like I don't have tertiary partners anymore. Um, I always tell people, they're like,
mm.
"Hey, are you a boy or a girl?" And I'm like, "Bitch, I'm an experience." It is a
Yeah,
whole different
yeah,
thing,
yeah, yeah.
and really,
Mm,
that's what I've kind of latched onto. Of I don't do things traditionally. I never did, and that's why my partners. I think why my partners always pretty much enjoyed where we were, because it was always, "Hey, let's figure it out. Let's have fun. Let's enjoy our bodies and ourselves and our time
mm.
and our energies and all that stuff." So,
Do you find that? Thanks for that. That was a really good answer. Do you think that, as a man, I can only speak for myself here and like speak to like my fellow, male friends, but
yeah.
there's a part of, let's say the penis represents that, you have, when the desire builds up, there's a willingness and want to desire to penetrate, to
Mhm.
go in. Is there
Yeah.
still that, do you still have that kind of desire even without the parts? Or do you now have the urge and desire to kind of bring in, like pull in, like, receive? or is it, are you now kind of like multifaceted, multi-dimensional in that sense? Like, what I'm trying to say is, do you ever have the ghost penis? Like where you still
Yeah,
want to
actually,
go?
those are multiple great questions. Yeah, no, those
Yeah,
are multiple great questions. So I love the idea that you mentioned, like, because I mentioned before, like either you are the receiver or the giver, and there's
yeah,
that feeling. So when
yeah,
you're a male, you have more of the feeling of I want to be the giver, the aggressor, the penetrator,
yeah,
all these types of things, and that's what you're supposed to have as a male, because that's what
yeah,
propagates the species, is you wanting to do that,
mm,
and you wanting to finish also,
yeah,
and that's what I think females don't understand is that males are designed. The goal of intercourse for males is to finish, and so the fact that they want to do that, women are like, well, they just want to finish. That's what their biology is telling them to do. It's, hey, finish. That's what you need to do. That's what you're here for. You're propagating your species. You're making babies.
mm,
That's what your biology is telling you. Now you have to curb that and go, well, I do care about this person. So you open their door and you get them a rag afterwards, and you do all these
yeah,
things. And how much you can do those other things
yeah,
is your character as a person. If you are any less than that, you are just operating biologically. And but if you do all those extra things, if it is your partner that you've been with for a long time, and you talk and you cuddle and you engage with them and you take care of them and you listen and you talk, that's just you being a good person, and engaging with your partner the way they want to be engaged with. Because there's plenty of women that want a little 10-minute quickie. There's plenty of women that can do that too. But I've always been the sense of I just want to work with my partner, because there's times women want to be aggressive. There's times that women want to be the penetrator in a sense, and they usually can't with a male unless they're into that kind of thing. But they want to be kind of aggressive, or I want to like do
mm,
stuff. And so women have their ways of taking charge. But I was always on both. I was consider myself what they call a switch. I can be
mm,
top or bottom, and so I've always been that way. And I think that's what makes for better relationships, is if you can meet your partner where they're at. Because now, if you're with a partner that's always top or always bottom, or they're always a certain way, then you can always be a certain way. But I've always let it be based on my partner, so I've never really had a bad experience. Now, if they just suck
mm,
and they don't communicate, and I don't have feelings for them and all this stuff, then yeah, it's going to be terrible. But for the most part, I can just match somebody, and my urges kind of do the same thing. I have an inclination, it's like 70-30 towards male feelings,
mm,
and I am attracted to women more. Well, actually, entirely. I can appreciate a good-looking guy, but it's not the same. It's not like an attraction. It's like, wow, that's a pretty man. That's a pretty boy. And I'll
mm,
just stare, and I'm like, wow, he looks awesome. And then I walk away. If it's a girl, it's like, I want to go talk to her. Let's let's do something about these feelings.
mm,
Um, and so yeah, even with my girlfriend now, it's 90%. It would look like a male female relationship 90% of the time. Now there is stuff we have to buy now and all these kinds of things, but hand stuff, mouth stuff, body stuff. I'm still end up being the male in those relationships, and even um, just in terms of like how we operate and how we move, I'm more aggressive and I'm more physical, and I do all the stuff that males usually do. So I am a lot more that way. But when I was transitioning and before, I did take a lot more of the female role. I was trying to feel that out. And if I had a partner that was that way and wanted to be the aggressor or want to be the dominant one, I probably would. But females don't tend to be
mm.
that way. They tend to be want to be the submissive. They want to be with the muscles. They want to be with the man.
Mm.
And so I'm like, I got you. No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
What's interesting is that, I mean, I've done talks about gender dynamics. This is something totally separate, but
yeah.
you tell me if this kind of relates to your story or not. But I talk about how the feminine wants to be contained. It wants to feel that containment. It wants to feel protected. Even you get they want the
Hmm.
protector and the provider. There's something about that
Yeah.
feminine energy that needs the rocks, the boundaries of the river, for which the river can
Hmm.
flow. And the male wants that kind of well, the masculine is slightly different to that. It wants to provide those banks to the river. It wants to provide
Yep.
that shield. Did you feel that, within those energies within yourself, that when you transitioned, you went more into that kind of more of that reception energy, the more of wanting to receive, more of wanting to be the flowing, essence that, and then wanting to have that masculine maybe frame to allow you to feel that. And then when you detransition, did you go more into that kind of how I'm describing more of that masculine energy of wanting to lead, wanting to go first, wanting to penetrate, wanting to be the protective boundaries for your partner, for instance? Could you noticeably feel those energies kind of oscillate within yourselves?
Yeah. And so this is going to be kind of one of my shortest answers. Yes.
Yeah,
It's
great.
exactly like you described.
Wow. Yeah.
Before I had both, before I transitioned, and then I felt my inclinations. And you understand gender, and I think that's what a lot of people get into, and that's what ended up. That was a really eloquent way of saying, of basically indicating or describing how I transitioned in the first place. Was I felt that I want to receive, I want to be protected. I have these other things and these other feelings that don't align with this masculine gender alignment. Um, and so I wanted to explore those, and I thought those meant um, that I was trans, but it actually just meant that I was exploring with those feelings, because everyone should have both. That's that yin
Yeah.
yang duality. Now, whether you're 50-50, 60-40, that depends on the day or your partner or your life at the time or whatever. Because there's times that males need that, they just need it less. And there's times that women are protective, they just do it less. And so everything is a spectrum.
Well, it's
And so
exactly like the yin and yang. It's exactly like the yin and yang.
mhm.
You've got a small amount of black within the white, small amount of white within the black, but we are
And then the
still,
whole thing
yeah,
has
there's
all of it.
unity. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep,
Sorry.
and that's exactly what life is supposed to be. And you nailed it exactly the way you described those feelings and that protector and those feelings and those things. That's exactly what I had, and I realized that at my core, while I had these feminine inclinations, that the masculine was where I wanted to be. It's where I felt more comfortable. Now, whether that was because I had 25 years of being a boy and being a man, especially in relationships, and not only, but I have two older sisters, and so I have that, or yeah, I have that protector thing. Where even for my family, for my female cousins and my sisters and my mom, I was the man of the family, and I was the boy,
Mm,
and I was the only male in my generation, and so I had a lot of these
mm,
masculine things. So maybe it was because of all that. You can call it social conditioning or social programming. um, but since I felt that way, yeah, that was an easier inclination and a more
mm,
comfortable space for me. And it's why when I was transitioning in the depth of my transition, when I was the most female, how I felt more uncomfortable, because I didn't know how to embody both. As you mentioned, you need to
mm,
have both, and I didn't know how to be both. It was when I was female, I was all female, because every time I was like, oh, I want to do a protector thing, or I feel like being the aggressor or the leader or the some of these other things, it felt uncomfortable, because it's like, oh, that's masculine. And then not
mm.
only that, like my voice never changed, my aura never changed. I'm 5'10", 180. Like I'm not exactly a female type of body. So when I get aggressive, it's masculine. Like, and so
Wow.
nothing ever
Okay.
aligned
So
feminine. Yeah.
whenever you wanted to go move more into that kind of, let's say, use the word aggressive. If anyone's watching this, that doesn't mean we're like harming people. It just means like
Yeah.
the dominant, like the leader, like leadership, that kind of
Driven. Yeah.
driven leadership, assertive, taking the lead type thing,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
When you had transition, when you were trying to take on that those particular behavioral, yeah, those particular behaviors, was there a
Mhm.
part of you that was rejecting it because you felt as though, no, that's my old identity then? Was
Mhm.
that kind of, was that what was happening? And then so you didn't know how to embrace it, integrate it. Were you kind of going, no, that's the old me.
Yep.
Even just those qualities themselves were so intrinsically attached to the masculine of the
Mhm.
old male Alex that
Yep.
what was happening in that moment? We just go, no, like
Yeah, I would have dysphoria, straight up dysphoria.
right,
I would go, well, I can't be that way, and it's like, well, I want to be that way, and I need to in this situation, but that's everyone's going to see me as masculine, and that's going to take away from my transition, and it's not how I should be, and it was just really confusing a lot, and so I navigated my life. I did what I needed to do, and not only that, but I've always been in management. I run restaurants, and so like that involves assertiveness, and that involves like a little bit of masculinity. So even when I was there as a female, I was driven, I was direct, I was all these things. And now, again, what's so hard about these conversations? I don't mean that women can't be that way,
yes,
but
exactly,
women at the end of the day can be assertive, and then they know they're a woman. They know it, they were born that way,
yeah,
blah, blah, blah. They're comfortable in that. So they can be assertive as often as they
mm,
need to. I wasn't yet. I wasn't convinced. The world was telling me all the time, well, you're not actually a girl. And I wasn't born that way. So in the back of my head, I'm like, well, am I actually? And so every time I was assertive, it was like, well, maybe I'm not. And then it would cause all these things. And what
mm,
being self-conscious does is it takes away directly from your assertiveness. Imagine feeling assertive and then feeling self-confident because you're not supposed to be assertive.
mm,
But what was crazy about that is that's what women feel all the time,
yeah.
because they're aggressive and people go, why are you so aggressive? You're
Why
just a
so
girl.
bossy? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I was like, wow, this is what women feel all the time. This sucks. And so it made me want to
mm,
advocate more for women to be aggressive, for to stand up for people doing that, for more rights, for more equal rights, for more these types of things. Because I got to feel what it was like to have my actions, because they were just necessary actions. I just needed to be the boss at the time. I wasn't trying to be masculine. I wasn't trying to be assertive. I was just doing what I needed to do. And I
Yeah.
instantly felt like I wasn't aligned to my gender. And I was like, that shouldn't be a problem. That shouldn't be an issue. Like, why is
Mm.
that a thing? But I felt that way. And so do they. And now women get over this, and that's how they become badasses.
Yeah.
They're assertive when they need to be, they're soft when they need to be. And the same thing with males. The most powerful males in the
Mm.
world are soft when they need to be, assertive when they need to be.
Yes.
Everybody's just better at who they
Yeah.
are when they can switch when they need to.
Yeah, it's like a slinky going down the stairs. You know those old 80s slinkies, like
Mm-hmm.
you can flip, you know, it's okay to flip,
Yep.
I think. But
Exactly.
that's really interesting when you say about women have that kind of reluctance to get into the male part of their psyche because it's sort of seen by society as you're not in your womanhood, you're not in your feminine, and there's a sort of almost competition with the sexes because
Yeah.
it feels a little bit like the energies are trying to combat each
Mhm.
other a little bit.
And
Would
even if
you?
it's not internally, it's externally. People are
Yeah,
telling them, why are you so bossy? Why are you
bossy.
acting
Yeah.
like a dude? You're not, you need to be more feminine. You need to smile more. Hey, honey, this, and hey, honey, that. And why aren't you so
Mm.
pretty? Why aren't you this? And they're like, I'm trying to make sandwiches. Like, what are you
Mm.
talking about? Like, I'm at
Does that really
work.
still go on though?
Yeah,
Did you really feel that that was really like that goes on? Like women still get that quite a lot.
absolutely.
Yeah.
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 And not only that, but since I've always been a manager, I get to see it because I have to coach people. And so I
Yeah.
have to coach and direct people on how they can just grow as employees, but then also with them interacting with the world. And so I have to deal with lots of qualities of people and different types of personalities. I have everything from 50-year-old employees to 19-year-old employees. I got people going to school, all kinds of stuff, because I'm in the food industry. So I have
Mm.
like a little bit of everybody. And so I got to see people, different personalities, people that could be assertive, people that couldn't. And I got to see the way, because I've always been really engaged with people,
Mm.
emotionally and intellectually, even with all my employees. That's how I end up being a good manager. That's why anybody can be a good anything, just be
Mm.
engaged,
Yeah.
be assertive,
Yeah.
be engaged, to listen well and stuff like that. So I got to see them. Um, I watched shift leaders, and other management that was underneath me. I watch the males have no problem being assertive, but have a problem being understanding. I watch the females have no problem being understanding to
Mm.
their employees, but have a problem being assertive. And I got to talk to them about that. I'm like, hey, why do you have a problem like coaching? She's like, well, at home I don't really get to say anything, and everyone
Mm.
has their own individual stuff. But I notice the women always align with not able to be assertive, or when they are, they're bad at it. I had the couple female employees that I had, who became management, who I put in charge of stuff, the ones that were assertive, there were some that were just good at it. And people are just good at stuff, but the people that
Mm.
weren't good at it, and the women that were trying to be assertive when they weren't actually, ended up being really shitty. They were just mean. They were aggressive. They didn't know how
Yeah.
to be assertive well, you know. In the same way, on the other side, I had people who were too understanding and were trying to be assertive, but were too nice and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I got to see it. And then I got to see it from employees, from customers. Customers would come in and they would see one of my female employees being like doing what she needed to do to be a boss. Hey, can you do this? Can you do that? And they're like, wow, you're aggressive. Where I
Mm.
would have a male shift leader do the same thing, and he gets seen as assertive and awesome. So I got to see even from the
Are they doing
customer's
the same
rejection.
thing though? That's the
Hmm.
ultimate question, isn't it? I think because I
And
think
pretty much they were. In a lot of those cases, they
yeah,
were. They were
yeah.
they were directing the same way.
Mm.
And now the male employees might have been more comfortable doing it, but
Yeah.
they were doing the same thing. And I got to watch, male customers come in and talk about how somebody wasn't pretty enough, or
Oh,
hey,
that's
you should
horrible.
smile more. And the
Mm.
older gentlemen like hitting on the younger girls, but they wouldn't, like, they would come in and only talk to the female employees, not the male employees.
Mm.
And I'm like, how does that make the girls feel?
Yeah,
And
that's
I got
not
to
cool.
watch all this
Yeah.
stuff. And I analyzed it through a gender perspective because I was going through my transition at the time. So I got to navigate this all at the same time. And then I got to watch it firsthand too, because
Yeah.
the days I would present as more female, I would have my hair down, makeup, I would get treated a certain way. Other days I'd come baseball cap in, low voice, hey, can I just get a blah, 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 blah. I would get treated a different way. And now, whether or not they knew
Mm.
I was trans, sometimes they did or they didn't. I got to watch how people treated me differently based on how I presented myself. So
Yeah.
I got to see firsthand how people get treated.
You've seen it all, yeah. Like you've
Yeah.
actually not only have you gone through the physical transformation and reversed it, you've seen the entire spectrum, but you've
Hmm.
integrated gender within yourself, it sounds like, because
Yeah.
you've kind of mastered the well, not I wouldn't say mastered, but
Yeah.
you've understood it,
Mhm.
you've explored the masculine side of the assertiveness, but you've also tempered that with the understanding of what it feels like to be in that feminine energy of empathy. Because
Hmm.
assertiveness without empathy is harm. It's just causing
Aggression.
damage.
Yeah.
Aggression. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's why I was saying about that word.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, the harm, like that's what people think with that word, right?
Yeah.
But you need to have that, you need to actually, everyone can do this. You can integrate those two energies within yourself.
Hmm.
If you are the assertive without the empathy, then yeah, you're a dick. If you're the
Yep.
empathy without the assertiveness, we call this being a pussy. Like, you can
Yeah.
even see it's fractal. There's even
Hmm.
the symbology of that in the
Yep.
an anatomical sense, that we use that maybe
Yeah.
subconsciously, because we know one's like that receiver, it's more in the feminine, one's in the masculine, it's the penis,
Hmm.
it's even making a point. When you
Yeah.
make points, conversation, I'm making a point. The penis does that. So we
Yeah.
even see reference of that in the physical form. But
Yeah.
you've actually explored all of that within yourself. It seems as though you've got that good yin yang balance, because
I
you've
try.
seen it all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, it's funny because that was always a symbol of my life, which is why I got into one of the reasons why I wanted to transition. I was like, I've always had this duality. My whole back, one of my biggest tattoos is I have like a yin yang on my whole back
Oh,
because it's
right.
always been a symbol of who I was. It was like I
Yeah.
was obsessed with it my whole life because I was like this balance of yin and yang, masculine and feminine, these different energies, and I always
Mm.
wanted to master that. And so it looks like I kind of did.
You kind
Uh,
of.
I thought I wasn't gonna come back from the female side of it, but apparently my
Mm.
yin yang is like, nope, you gotta have both. Yep.
Did you start going on uh, hormones again to basically replace the estrogen? Did you go on like testosterone?
I wanted to, yeah. I've
Yeah.
had issues with medical insurance, but I've wanted
Yeah.
to just so it could fix and repair kind of the damage I've done, put me back
Right.
physically where I wanted to be and stuff, let hair grow, start coming back,
Yeah.
and just get those things back. But it's harder.
Mm.
But yeah, so yeah, I wanted to go back on hormones for testosterone just to kind of get my body right. I didn't need it, but I wanted, I was back in the gym, but I wanted to regain muscle because I'm not able to gain muscle like I used to and all that kind of stuff
Mm.
that testosterone does. And I need it health wise, even.
Yeah.
Without it, you start getting heart problems and other kind of stuff.
Mm.
But yeah, the documentary is with through it's technically through a church, but it's basically the pastor reaching out with a filmmaker. Um, and we can link all the details. I was going to write them all down, but
Yeah.
I didn't know how much we'd get into that or if it was just my story. Um, so yeah, it's with through a church, but it's basically the pastor wanting to educate, and so he reached out to a filmmaker, and then that filmmaker found us, and they're reaching out. It's me, Heather, and then a bunch of other people are going to be involved as soon as they can find people. They just wanted to film a promo, get the idea together, and
Mm.
then kind of start launching. So it's going to be a bigger project than me or Heather. And it's also going to include people that have detransitioned a long time ago, that have fully transitioned and they're happy with it. It wants to show the whole spectrum and have an intelligent conversation about this, the same way you and I are doing, where it's nothing but love, nothing but acceptance. But we really just kind of want to understand, which is the dialogue we need to have. And it's why it's a project that I wanted to be involved in, because it was giving everyone a platform and letting everyone kind of talk about it in an intelligent way. Um, and that's why they found me and they found Heather because Heather's the same way. She's very intelligent, very punctual, understands her process, was very introspective with her process. And that's what we want to get to the bottom of people that have transitioned and detransitioned. Like, let's have a calm talk about it. Let's take away the protest signs. Let's take away the lawsuits, and let's sit down and have a conversation. You know.
And the people that are thinking of having the transition as well, it's important for
Hmm.
them, right? And
Yep.
if you could summarize the document, does it have a name, by the way, just so we can, we'll put the links in
It
at the bottom, but
Yeah, it doesn't yet,
yeah.
because I had a promo. I think there's tertiary names floating around, but
Okay.
we're waiting to go on that. Um, but what was the question? If I could
Yeah,
summarize
no,
it?
we've got about 30 seconds left. If you could
Yep.
just, and by the way, thank you for coming on. Like, this has been one of the most
I,
fascinating interviews I've ever done. Love to talk to you again, Alex. I think it's been
hey,
brilliant.
part two. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'd love to. But if you could just summarize the message of the documentary, or what you could say in like just a few words for
Yep.
people that are
It
having this, same sort of thing you went through.
Yep. It is an engaged conversation with people on every stage of the spectrum of transitioning, trying to understand themselves, the world, and how they interact with it.
Beautiful, beautiful.